Is there a secret PLL? Is there a secret PLL was asked so many times amongst the cubing community. And I think practically nobody now even knows about this. So a lot of this is actually going to be my own research and figuring this out because there's really nobody who has ever actually touched on this before. So a lot of this is going to be my own experience and knowledge with cubing. So is there a secret PLL? Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you need to know is that there's a lot of basic facts in PLLs that you probably do not know that you do need to know. And this is pretty well known amongst all cubing members or community or just in general. So let's go ahead and start with the basics. There are 4 different categories which PLLs can be listed into. There are the A-PLLs, the D-PLLs, the E-PLLs, and the C-PLLs. As I'm sure you can guess by the names, it's pretty obvious where I'm going with this. So let's go ahead and start with the A-PLLs. A-PLL stands for Adjacent Positioning Last Layer. What does this mean? I think the easiest way of explaining this very first case or for category is by looking at the T-perm. The T-perm fits in the A-PLL category. And the reason for this is because A-PLL represents adjacent corner swap. So for instance, we have these 2 corners here and these need to swap adjacently. And to do this, you would just perform the algorithm and then it would swap these 2 corners. So all PLLs that have an adjacent swap or with corners fit in the A-PLL category. Now here's the real question. How should we hold the cube when solving an A-PLL? Now how we should do it is by holding it where the headlights are solved. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily going to be the fastest way, but it's how we should be doing it. So in this case right here, we want to hold where the headlights are, put the top aligning where the headlights are already solved, and then perform the algorithm to solve it. Another example that I would like to point out is the F-perm. Now, this is also an A-PLL because we have headlights. So we would align the headlights to where their matching side is, and then we would perform the F-perm. There are a lot of A-PLLs, and I'm not going to bother going through each and every single one just for the sake and length of this video. So I will be listing them all on the screen, as you can see. So those are all the A-PLLs. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next category. Next is the D-PLLs. The D-PLLs are similar to the A-PLLs, but the D-PLLs represent a diagonal swap instead of an adjacent swap. So for instance, there are no headlights because you need to swap your corners diagonally. So for instance, the Y-perm is a perfect example of this. As you can see, these corners need to swap diagonally. And how do we define by holding how we should hold the cube? Now in the last example, the definition of holding it properly would be by holding where the headlights are. So we don't have headlights. So what is going to be our new definition for solving the D-PLLs? Well, it's pretty straightforward, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to hold it where all your blocks are solved. So as you can see, you have a block here and a block here. Just hold it in the best way of having the most blocks being solved, and then you would perform Y-perm on the right-facing side, of course. Then, of course, there is the V-perm, and as this one follows, by following the same definition for the Y-perm, where you want to hold where all the blocks are solved, this one you have one chunk here, and you're going to solve it, and then you want to hold in the proper position and then solve the Y-perm. Just a reminder, just because you can hold it in a different position doesn't mean you can't hold it in that way. This is just a definition of holding where you should have the top for solving it, not necessarily the fastest way. The last example that I'm going to be showing you for a diagonal swap is the end-perms. And the reason why I'm showing you the end-perms is because you have 4 different pairs of blocks, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in order for you to be holding this in the proper position, you could hold it like this, but if you also do a single U2, you could also solve in this position here. This doesn't actually matter which way you hold it, as long as if you have 2 blocks solved and not none. So following the same principles of rules, you're just going to hold it to where the blocks are solved. And then you're going to go ahead and perform the algorithm. So that all the other DPLLs are going to be listed on screen for diagonal swap. So as you can see, the A-perms definition is by following by headlights. You want to hold where the headlights are solved. The corner swaps are going to be following where the blocks are solved. And then comes the E-PLLs. The E-PLLs is edges positioning last layer. So it is when you only need to swap the edges. I think the best example of this case is, of course, going to be the H-perm, as most people configure. And the definition of holding this one is pretty straightforward. For all E-PLLs, all you're going to want to do is hold it where all of the corners are solved. Because you're only swapping edges, you don't need to worry about which way you need to hold your corners. And then from there, you would just perform the algorithm. Same follows for also like the U-perm. You're just going to want to hold it where all of the corners are already solved. So not in any other position, not necessarily faster, once again, just a reminder, but it's how you want to hold it. And then you would perform the U-perm. Another example, of course, is the Z-perm, and you're going to want to hold it where all of the corners are solved, not necessarily the fastest way. Once again, I'm going to keep stressing that because it's not necessarily always going to be the best scenario, and then solve the Z-perm. So all of the E-PLLs are listed on screen. So the A-PLLs follow all adjacent corner swaps. D-PLLs represent holding where all the blocks are solved, and then the E-PLLs represent where all of the corners are solved. Now for the C-PLLs. The C-PLLs are the most complex one out of the rest of these. And this is when it's going to get very, very confusing. The most obvious example of a C-PLL is, of course, the A-perms. If we look at this example, as you can see, all of the edges are solved, and all we're doing is a 3-cycle of corners. And what you might think is, okay, just hold it where the block is solved, and then solve the A-perm. Or you might even think hold it where all of the edges are solved, and then solve the A-perm. Like that. But this is actually not right, because we need to look at this a little bit more closer. This follows the rule of actually an A-PLL. And here's why. You have headlights right here, and this is an adjacent corner swap. So even though this looks like a C-PLL, it technically does not qualify as one, and which means you should hold it in this position here, technically, even though it's not the fastest way. And that means you would have to end off with an extra U move. So does that follow up as a C-PLL, or does that follow up as an A-PLL? That's something that is very interesting in my opinion, but both of the A-perms do technically qualify as a C-PLL and an A-PLL. And the A-perms are the only one that technically fits in two of these categories. Now let's go ahead and look at one other example that I think for C-PLLs that I think you guys are not going to be expecting me explaining. And that is, of course, the H-perm. Now, let me first off say that no, this does not qualify as a C-PLL. A lot of people think it would, and that's the only reason why I'm addressing this, but no, it does not qualify as a C-PLL. Because a lot of people would look at these edges and assume because they're all solved, we would have a corner swap here, and that would be by swapping these corners and these corners. But this isn't any form of diagonal or adjacent swap, and on top of that, even though these edges are where they need to be solved, all the corners are already also solved, which means this does not qualify as a C-PLL. And this follows up as the role of still a E-PLL. So even though some people may tell you that an H-perm follows up as a C-PLL, that's not actually true. Now for probably the most confusing part is the E-perm. It is the last algorithm that I have not actually touched on. And then, of course, there is the Secret PLL. So let me go ahead and talk about the E-perm. As you can see, all of the edges are solved, and you might be wondering, okay, so how do we hold this? Now, if we were following up as the roles of holding where all the edges need to be solved and holding in your correct position, the thing about this is, unlike all the rest of the algorithms, there are only two specific ways on how you can actually hold this. And that really defeats the purpose of all of these other PLLs. So for instance, you could hold it in this position for the E-perm, where these two need to swap and these two need to swap, or you could also hold it in this position where these two need to swap and these two need to swap. So there's no real definition of a proper way to hold particularly the E-perm, even though the corner PLLs need to be held where the edges are already solved. You might just think to do is hold it in this position and then solve the E-perm. And though this works, this isn't quite exactly right. I want you to take a look at these two E-perms as an example here. These are both E-perms and there really is absolutely nothing about them until you take a closer look. So let's first start with this one as an example. So what would happen if we looked at this E-perm in a completely different perspective? So let's say we started off by solving this blue and red and yellow corner to hold it where it's completely solved. The only other piece that's going to be solved is the corner directly diagonal from it. And then if we look, this is technically a D-PLL, but it does not fit the quality due to the fact that these edges do not form any form of blocks, so there is no actual D-PLL in order for this to be properly solved. But then this goes one step further. Let's take a look at this example of the E-perm once again. Holding it where the exact same corner that I demonstrated on is solved, and then having still, this is automatically going to be solved as well. And you might not notice any bit of difference on these cubes. But I want you to look closer. Look at the edges. The edges are different, even though these are both E-perms. But I want you to look even further than that. Which direction do all these edges need to go? The green edge needs to go to here, the red edge needs to go to here, the blue edge needs to go to here, and the orange edge needs to go to here. All the edges are making a cycle going clockwise. Now I want you to take a look at this one. This orange edge needs to go to here, the blue edge needs to go to here, the red edge needs to go to here, and the green edge needs to go to here. All these edges are going counterclockwise. Do you see the pattern here? Both of these form as completely two different cases, even though they solve the exact same way, and still following up at all of the rules and principles that I've already demonstrated before. They're not two different D-PLLs, they're not A-PLLs, they follow up on only C-PLLs because they're only corner position swapping. So does this mean that there is a secret PLL? Does this mean that there is a second E-perm? Now this is where it's going to start to get even more confusing. I'm going to be demonstrating this a little bit further. So let's go ahead and put these back to where they were solved. Now a lot of you advanced people probably already have an argument against this. And that would be, take a look at this. Let's say we weren't only addressing these two corners here, even though both these are E-perms. Let's say we were going to use this corner as an example, but this corner right here as an example. Now if we take a closer look, all of the edges are now going clockwise. You see that? So now these two are matching, even though the corners are not. So then does this mean that there isn't two PLL algorithms for E-perm? And the answer is no. There is another argument that can actually shoot this down. And it would be by taking a look, even though these perform the exact same way. So as we can see, you'd hold from this position, and then in this one, you would hold in this position. You might just think it's only one rotation, so it's not that big of a deal. But that's, even though these solve the exact same way, does not mean that there is not a different PLL case. So let me show you one more example here. In all the examples I've already shown you, you never have to worry about the edges needing to go in a different direction. They always have one strict way where they need to go. For instance, the T-perm, this edge always needs to these two always need to be swapped. No matter what, however way you hold it, these two always have to be swapped. A Y-perm, as another example, is that these two always need to be swapped. No matter which way you hold it, these two need to swap. It doesn't change which direction they need to go. Even the Z-perm follows up in the same category, even though some people would argue otherwise. I'm not going to address that because that's a completely different topic. But no matter what, one single turn, they still always, these two need to swap and these two always need to swap. So as you can see, all of these examples that I've just shown you, there's only one specific way in which the edges actually need to go. So then when we go back to the E-perm as an example, as you can see, these edges now need to go clockwise, while these ones need to go counterclockwise. And this just defeats the whole purpose. Now, even though some of you may just be saying in your head, oh, well, just do one rotation, because when you do the single move like this, all you would need is just one rotation. But you see, I've already explained that a second ago in the sense of looking at the pieces on where they need to go. And the rotation, even though that may make it look like it's the same algorithm, it isn't. That's the reason why you can solve it using the same algorithm. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, I understand that this is quite complex and there is really no simple way of explaining this. Now, let me just remind you that, first off, this is not easy to understand, so if you're having trouble, don't worry. Really, you don't need any of this knowledge in advanced cubing at all. Let me just say that. This is just more in detail structure of these algorithms. So if you don't understand, don't make too much big of a deal about it, because this is really just an extra video for these puzzles. And something else I just want to say, before any of you comment your own opinion on all of this, really actually consider all of this that I've actually said. Go through this, do your own experimenting, and I want to know what you guys actually think. Do you believe that there's two PLLs, or do you like two E-perm PLLs, or do you believe that there's only one E-perm? I want to know. Now, in my opinion, how I see it, I honestly could see either way. So like I could see this as being only one E-perm or not being one E-perm, because there are principles that overlap each other and there can be actually seen in two different ways. One example is like the rotation. However, I did explain a reasoning for that. And then of course the single U-turn, which I did also explain another reasoning for that. But even though they fall up in the same algorithm, does that mean that there is only one E-perm? And so on and so on. In my opinion, I do believe I lean on more on the fact that there is two E-perms. Now, if you don't, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And in fact, if someone gives me a good reason to believe that there is only one E-perm, I'll completely believe them. Like if I see a good reason, I'll believe it. So shoot your comment, prove me wrong if I am wrong, or help back me up if I'm right. You know, I want to know what you guys have to say. This is not an easy thing to understand, and it really is actually no need in the cubing community. Like, to be honest, like there really is no actual need for this. It's just a cool little extra, I guess you could say, feature for 3x3. Now the thing is actually this story of the Secret PLL actually doesn't end here. Now I know a lot of you are going to be starting to rage in the comments saying, whoa, wait, what? And simply put, there could actually be a second Secret PLL. Now let me explain myself a little bit here, and that is, I am not including this portion in this video only because this video would be extremely long, almost twice as long as this video currently is, and I know a lot of you would not be watching this video because of the length, and having it like close to 40 minutes is a bit much. So if you guys want me to make a video on the possibility of there being a second Secret PLL, let me know in the comments, but it will certainly be even more confusing than this one already is. And for all you advanced cubers that want to have a basic idea of what this PLL is related to, think about what PLL is related to the E-perm. But I'm going to leave it off at that. But anyway, that's everything for this video. Just a reminder, please let me know what you guys think of this. And if you enjoy this video, please remember to hit that like button down below and hit the subscribe button as well as those bell notifications to be notified when upcoming videos are released. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.